Digging in, the correlation between drug tunnels and the barriers built along the U.S.-Mexico.
Tiny houses right now, they're undefined. There is no definition in San Diego County Code or California Code for what tiny houses are.
The other hurdles to building tiny house communities in San Diego. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. As President Trump looks to build a border wall, criminal groups continue to dig tunnels under existing fencing. Records newly obtained by KPBS show a correlation between illegal tunnels found at the U.S.-Mexico border and the construction of walls and fences. KPBS Frontiers reporter Jean Guerrero has more.
The tunnels found under the U.S.-Mexico border are often used to smuggle drugs into the U.S., as well as humans.
So if I fall, it'll catch me? Yeah. Okay.
In June, KPBS explored one of the largest tunnels ever found, which is located in Otay Mesa.
We're here at the U.S.-Mexico border fence. Right on the other side of this fence is where the entrance to the drug tunnel was.
We wanted to find out exactly when and where these tunnels had been found throughout history. Customs and Border Protection repeatedly denied our Freedom of Information Act requests, but the agency finally released its records this month. They showed that the U.S. started finding 1 or 2 tunnels a year in the 90s. That's when officials were building dozens of new miles of barriers along the border. But in 2006, the number of tunnels found more than tripled, hitting the double digits for the first time. That's the same year the Secure Fence Act was passed, triggering the construction of nearly 600 miles of new barriers over the next 6 years. That same period, officials found more than 100 tunnels. In other words, there's a correlation between the number of tunnels being found and the construction of walls and fences at the border.
Right.
David Shirk of the University of San Diego says the data shows that walls and fences don't actually stop the illegal flow of drugs and people into the U.S.
The reality is that the wall simply ensures that there will be ever more creative ways of getting around it. Maybe they don't break through the wall. Maybe they use balloons. Maybe they use drones.
Well, the razor wire on top acts as an area denial device.
But Joshua Wilson of the National Border Patrol Council says walls are effective.
It was much harder to control the area before the primary fencing. The human smuggling organizations basically ran wild.
He says the fence stops smugglers along most of the border because tunnels are concentrated in areas with certain characteristics. That includes good soil conditions and nearby warehouses to disguise tunnel entry and exit points, like in Otay Mesa. Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
Counting down to Carmageddon, the shutdown of the southbound 5 and 805 freeways crossing the U.S.-Mexico border. It's part of the $740 million expansion project underway at the San Ysidro port of entry. Major construction is planned for this weekend, and the freeways will be closed at the 905 for 57 hours. Traffic will be rerouted, but officials say if you can avoid driving into Tijuana this weekend, you should.
And if you absolutely have to drive into Mexico during the 57-hour closure, give yourself time. It's 9 miles out to Otay Mesa. We know that there's limited capacity at a Mexican facility. People should anticipate significant delays going into Mexico that weekend. And so if at all possible, try and avoid it.
The closure will begin at 3 a.m. on Saturday and last until noon Monday. Again, the 5 and 805 will be closed at the 905 freeway. There will be detours to get to homes and businesses between the 905 and the port of entry. Transit will also be available and the pedestrian entries at San Ysidro will be opened. A local taxpayer group wants to double-check the city's numbers regarding community choice energy. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen says almost all of the data the San Diego County Taxpayer Association is asking for is already public.
San Diego is considering community choice as a way to reach its goal of 100% renewable energy by 2035. Its feasibility study found a city-run program to buy energy could offer cheaper rates and more renewables. The Taxpayers Association sent a letter to Mayor Kevin Faulconer asking for the study's assumptions and modeling strategies. The study itself contains 55 pages on just that, an exhaustive explanation of its methodology and assumptions. Nicole Kapritz, executive director of the nonprofit Climate Action Campaign, says the Taxpayers Association was trying to sow doubt in the study.
The feasibility study done by the city was rigorous, used extremely conservative assumptions, and was peer-reviewed by independent experts.
Association President Haney Hong says he's not trying to sow doubt. He just wants to work with city staff to better understand the study's assumptions.
If there's stuff that's, for instance, in the feasibility study that's already there, well, then work with us to let's draw that out of the study.
The Taxpayers Association clarified it also wants a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet used by the study's authors to calculate future energy costs. But that spreadsheet contains customer data from SDG&E that the utility will not let the city release. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
As the homeless population grows and rents balloon, today San Diego leaders announced a series of proposals to help alleviate the housing shortage. According to a city council report, at least 220,000 new housing units will need to be built by 2028. The report says numerous changes to the city's codes and procedures are required to meet the housing demand. Changes include rezoning areas around transit hubs to increase density, converting unused industrial zones into residential areas, and encouraging smaller unit sizes. The report identified the communities of Skyline, Paradise Hills, Linda Vista, Otay Mesa, Claremont Mesa, and Navajo as areas with the largest housing growth potential. Tiny homes are typically thought to be less expensive and have a smaller carbon footprint, factors adding to their appeal. But KPBS North County reporter Allison St. John says one planned tiny home community in San Diego has turned out to be a costly failure. Plus, California is not making it easy for those who want to live in a tiny house.
Welcome to our tiny home.
Ashley Mazanek lives in an undisclosed location in San Diego's North County. She doesn't talk about where her tiny home is because the location is basically a legal loophole.
I work from home, so I'm usually sitting at this computer doing lots of wonderful work for Eco Arts Foundation.
Mazanek, like many tiny house advocates, sees them as a no-brainer.
Tiny houses solve two problems. One of the problems is low-income housing. We have a low-income housing shortage all over San Diego. In fact, we're breaking California law. And the second one is we have a climate action plan that we are not going to be able to meet unless we have more options for eco-friendly housing.
In a county like San Diego, where the price of vacant land can be well over $100,000 an acre, the idea of building communities of tiny homes makes a lot of sense. But it turns out that while building a tiny home is fairly straightforward, finding a place to put it is much more difficult.
As it all evolves, the houses will get better.
Ben Rawson built Mazanek's tiny house, and he wants to build more.
And most people are looking to spend about $50,000 on a tiny house like this one right here.
Rawson is planning to develop a tiny house community somewhere in unincorporated San Diego County, but he won't say exactly where yet because he's still working on the permits.
Tiny houses right now, they're undefined. There is no definition in San Diego County Code or California Code for what tiny houses are. So finding places to put a structure that doesn't have a legal definition becomes difficult.
This is super fun today because this is the front door.
Rawson is not the first to try this idea.
And then there's a really beautiful bay window that's going right here.
Last year, KPBS profiled Janet Ashworth.
Thank you, sir.
Who also started building tiny homes.
Well, I knew that to have a successful tiny home company, I also needed to start a community here in San Diego.
Her company is called Habitat Tiny Homes.
Ashworth had no trouble attracting investors.
There isn't a tiny home community yet.
Tom Vanderblumen, a civil servant living in a 3-bedroom house in Carlsbad, is contemplating retirement.
Actually, I've been interested in tiny homes for like 10 years or more, even before it was popular.
He was one of about 30 people who gave Ashworth a $1,000 deposit to be part of her Habitat's Tiny Homes community. But it never happened.
I think the whole thing kind of collapsed.
He lost his deposit. Others lost much more.
This is the fraud case where
It's all clearly stated here what happened, where they wrote checks and for totaling that amount of money, $62,000. I mean, I think there's a bankruptcy now, and they'll probably never get their money back.
It still has a community type of feel to it.
Ashforth is now living in a tiny home, also in an undisclosed location in North County. She's facing several lawsuits. She expects her company, Habitat's Tiny Homes, will declare bankruptcy.
Well, I won't lose anything because I don't have anything to lose. Because I used every dime I had in my personal name, including credit cards, into this project. I was fully invested. And so when the company tanked, I tanked personally as well.
Ashforth says anyone living in a tiny home classified as an RV in San Diego is in a precarious situation.
It's illegal to live in an RV full time. So right there, basically what they did is made it so you can't live in a tiny home full time.
She says the other route is to call it a mobile home. She bought land in Poway, but the money ran out before she could get it rezoned for a tiny homes community. Tiny homes communities are developing in Oregon and Washington, mainly to help house the homeless. But Mazanek says the path still needs to be blazed to build tiny home communities in California.
We do need policy that is favorable to tiny houses. And currently, just the permitting and all of the requirements to be in a tiny house are stacked way against the homeowner.
The first house on the community will actually be my own.
Rawson says he's found 3 acres for his tiny homes community, and he's collecting applications from would-be tiny homeowners.
We're going to break ground this coming spring, and the first houses, it'll be built just like we build tiny houses. They'll have to meet a different code guidelines in order to satisfy the county.
Vander Blumen has a word of warning.
I would just say do your homework. And it's not nearly as easy as you think it would be.
Allison St. John, KPBS News.
Today, MTS got final approval for changes to dozens of bus routes across San Diego. The transit agency's board of directors unanimously approved the plans. They include an extra $2 million for increased frequency on the system's most popular bus routes. Some routes that are less popular are getting less frequency. MTS hopes the changes will reverse a 2-year trend of falling ridership. Public health nurses are taking hepatitis prevention measures to the streets. It's part of the San Diego prevention campaign announced this week. County workers teamed up with American Medical Response. They offered hepatitis A vaccinations to at-risk populations, particularly the homeless. More than 400 people have been infected with the virus. 16 people have died. San Diego is one of 3 California cities that have declared an outbreak. Next week, several more free vaccination events will take place across the city. There's a push to help young people better understand their emotions and learn conflict resolution. KPBS education reporter Megan Burks visited Meridian Elementary School in El Cajon to see one program already in action.
Let's talk about you, then we'll talk about me. Be a good listener to everyone you meet.
Ms. Calhoun's second grade class is one of 490 classrooms in the Cajon Valley Union School District implementing National University's Sanford Harmony program this year. It aims to help students deal with their and their peers' emotions through regular activities and story time.
And from her body language, can you see how it went from standing up nice and tall to her shoulders are kind of hunched over a little bit? We need to pay attention to body language, don't we?
Assistant Superintendent Karen Minshew says she jumped at the chance to bring the free curriculum to her schools. She says they're skills students will need in the future, but also right now. El Cajon is home to a diverse community of immigrants and refugees.
We want kids to have intentional conversations with each other and to build that empathy and to really understand who's in my classroom.
She was talking out loudly and clearly. Now she's barely even talking, like in a low voice.
A growing body of research suggests the emphasis on social-emotional skills has benefits for the classroom.
Studies have shown through social-emotional learning programs and through Sanford Harmony that empathy goes up, aggression goes down, math and reading scores go up, and classroom management. Less time is spent with the teachers in doing that.
The district is only 5 weeks into the program, but is already seeing anecdotal results.
Foursquare gets pretty heated out there, and you're out, and no, I'm not. So arguments are settled with a quick push, where now they're given the language to communicate effectively, strategies to resolve the conflicts that they have.
Cajon Valley plans to measure its outcomes at the end of the school year. Megan Burks, KPBS News.
After some showers, sunshine and clear skies on the horizon for San Diego. Erin Calandra has more in tonight's forecast.
The eastern part of our county is under a wind advisory through tomorrow around 1 o'clock. We're seeing gusts up to 50 miles per hour, so very dangerous driving conditions, especially through the mountain passes. Also throughout the desert, we do have some visibility issues as well because of blowing dust, causing some problems. And also, of course, those high-profile vehicles, be careful. Both hands on the steering wheel. It's going to be gusty there on the highway. Taking a look at the bigger picture, we are seeing some snow in the Sierras. That is because of a big cold front that is pushing in our direction. Our temperatures a bit below average. I'm sure you noticed some mist, some kind of rainy conditions throughout the county today. 64 degrees tonight, mostly cloudy. The good news is those clouds that kind of stuck around here today, we're going to be seeing less and less of that throughout the weekend. So for tonight, Oceanside 57, San Diego 64, Ramona 52 degrees, Borrego Springs 58, and Mount Laguna 42. Be careful again here in the mountains and deserts because of those gusty winds throughout the night. Here we are, big dip in the jet stream. Temperatures 10 to 20 degrees below normal. Not as drastic for us here in San Diego, but still a bit cooler than it should be. I'm sure you've noticed. San Diego 73 degrees. Those clouds are going to be building and then kind of going away throughout the day. And as I said, throughout the weekend, we're going to see even less clouds. Oceanside 75, Ramona 72, Alpine 71 degrees, Mount Laguna 58 degrees for the high temperature. Here's this big dip in the jet stream, which means to the east we have this big ridge. The whole northeastern and central part of our country is seeing temperatures well above average. Very little rainfall, so really beautiful conditions there. A bit warm though. Here we are the next couple days along the coast. We are warming up back to the 80s by Monday with sunshine. Inland we are at 76 on Saturday, and then Sunday a bit warmer, reaching 90s by the work week. In the mountains, we're in the 50s, eventually reaching the 60s and up to the 70s. So we do have a warming trend here. And in the deserts, nice. We are back in the double digits. We're going to stay there for some time. For KPBS News, I'm Erin Calandra.
And coming up tomorrow, our KPBS Listening Post in El Cajon. And we're looking back at the police shooting of Alfred Alongo. His death sparked protest and raised many questions about race and policing. We want to know if any of those questions have been answered. Our KPBS Listening Post is tomorrow from noon to 2 at the corner of Main Street in Magnolia in downtown El Cajon. The machine best known for spitting out $20 bills turns 50 this year. As more people go mobile with their transactions, AP reporter Marina Hutchinson says the ATMs were a revolution in the banking industry.
This is how they make ATMs. The once novel and now ubiquitous cash dispensing machine just turned 50 this year, and they are still indispensable.
Think of the ATM as a device that bridges the gap between the physical world and the digital world. It's no longer a device just to withdraw and deposit cash.
There are roughly 3 million automated teller machines in the U.S. alone, according to the ATM Industry Trade Group. Most are actually owned by private companies, not banks, who install them in convenience stores, restaurants, and bars for customers in need of quick cash. This adds up to billions of dollars in fees for the banking industry. But as people use less cash in favor of credit and debit cards, and now mobile payment, could the ATMs eventually go out of business?
The technology will evolve. I think the ATMs will always have a place, just like cash will always have a place. It's not going anywhere anytime soon.
ATMs have already gotten more sophisticated and could include voice or facial recognition in the future.
In the next few years, I think biometrics is going to be mainstream for authentication and fraud detection in how we service our customers. So we are always looking at new technologies, new biometrics to be able to test and learn from.
NCR, a major manufacturer of ATMs, says the newer models have more functions than ever and are designed to act more like your smart device.
Takes their everyday iPhone, iPad, tablet look and feel from how they use it, swipe, gesture, multi-touch, and we've put that onto the ATM.
Other features include a dispute resolution camera to confirm whether customers received their money and the ability to apply for a loan.
Here I just put my email address. Now I'm going to sign. And then I'm going to take a picture, capture an image of the person in front of the ATM. Now we're going to confirm the application, and the appropriate person at the bank or financial institution will get that application, and the customer will get a summary.
While ATMs were not the first self-service device, vending machines have been around longer. They made people comfortable interacting with kiosks, from airport check-ins to self-checkout at stores, a lasting impact on how we do business. Marina Hutchinson, The Associated Press.
It's a bird, it's a plane, it's an insect. In tonight's SciTech Report, producer Bill Hallman shows us a Penn State team that uses high-speed cameras and fluid dynamics to understand the mechanics of insects in flight.
When the Wright brothers studied flight, they studied the seagull. Elegant and efficient, they were easy to observe and easy to emulate. But there was another type of flyer on that desolate North Carolina beach. It was more dynamic than the seagull, and it broke all of the rules the Wrights worked so hard to uncover. The fly. Based on what we know about flight, this guy should drop like a rock. A group of Penn State scientists, led by Bo Chang, are trying to figure out why it doesn't.
This is a relatively simple question to ask, but an extremely difficult one to answer since it requires us to study various aspects of insect flight that includes their flight dynamics, their aerodynamics, the structure and functions of their biological sensors.
To most people, flies are pests. But to an engineer, these insects can perform tasks that have no equal in the natural world.
These tiny flyers, they only have a very limited amount of neurons. However, they are able to solve extremely challenging flight control tasks like the upside-down landing on the ceiling within a split of a second.
This doesn't seem like a big deal, but keep watching. Now imagine you're in an airplane, and the only way to land is upside down at a fixed location. No existing aircraft is capable of performing this type of maneuver, and if it did, it would take an exceptional pilot to pull it off. Flies do it hundreds of times a day. Chang's team is interested in their brains and their aerodynamics.
In fact, they use highly unsteady and rotational flow to generate lift, and that's something perceived as pretty bad for conventional engineered flight.
The basics of conventional flight go something like this. As a plane speeds up, air splits above and below the wing. The air at the top moves faster over the curved surface, creating low pressure. The pressure difference between the top and bottom of the wing creates lift. Flies create lift another way.
When the wings are moving, they generate their own aerodynamic lift, but then the LEV, the leading edge vortex, which is on top of that, introduces an extra suction force which pulls the wing further up and helps the insects to hover or just to fly and not fall down, basically.
Think of the leading edge vortex as a small tornado, a rapid swirl of air riding at the top edge of the wing. Like the airplane, the fast-moving air creates low pressure, and that creates lift. To study this, Chang's team has created unique devices that help them contain the flies and record them at 5,000 frames per second.
So what we do is we attach a fly to this end of the rod, and we sort of just put it back in. And what will happen is the fly will start flapping its wings, and it'll sort of fly in a circle.
Flight mill uses electromagnets to levitate the rod. This keeps the fly on a predictable path. Upside-down landings are recorded using this, a plexiglass cube surrounded by lights and high-speed cameras.
Essentially, we can track different points on the wing and then get the three-dimensional coordinates for these points on the wing or on the body. And then we can essentially reconstruct the wing motion as well as the tiny deformation of the wing. And then we will have a full understanding of the kinematics of the flight.
The team is also partnering with the University of Virginia to understand the fluid dynamics. They want to know how wing movement can affect the stability of that leading edge vortex we just talked about. The team is also looking to the future. Humans have already harnessed the power of flight, but can we take it to the next step and copy the complex movements and reaction time of bugs? Right now, there are robotic flyers that can mimic the basic mechanics of an insect. But according to Cheng, a mechanical device capable of something like this is still decades away. For now, all we can do is watch and learn.
You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.